Moving into that house felt like breathing for the first time. Real breathing. For years, I'd poured everything I had into my work. Long hours, endless travel, all of it for a dream. A dream of a place where my family could truly belong. A place where my kids, Maya and Leo, could run free without a single worry. This house, nestled in Willow Creek Estates, was that dream made real. A sprawling colonial style home with a porch swing, a big backyard, and ancient oak trees lining the quiet streets. Maria, my wife, had tears in her eyes the day we got the keys. She pictured birthday parties on the lawn, summer evenings under the stars. I saw security, a legacy. We'd been there maybe a month, just settling in, unpacking boxes, the kids exploring every nook and cranny. I remember Maya finding a secret compartment in her closet. Her face lit up like a Christmas tree. Those were good days, peaceful days. Then the first letter arrived. A crisp, white envelope with the HOA emblem stamped in silver. It felt official, important. I opened it at the kitchen island, Maria making breakfast nearby. It was a notice about our lawn. Apparently, it was a quarter-inch too long in some spots. A quarter-inch? I laughed. Maria just raised an eyebrow. Already? She asked, a flicker of something in her voice I couldn't quite place. Doubt, suspicion? I dismissed it. A new community, new rules. We'd just gotten busy. I sent a landscaping crew out the next day. No big deal. A week later, another letter. This one about the color of the trim on our mailbox. It wasn't the approved shade of Willow Creek Classic Cream. It was, well, it was cream. Just a slightly different tone, I guess. I remembered painting it myself. A Saturday project with Leo, who'd insisted on helping. Now, they wanted us to repaint it. My jaw tightened a little. This was getting ridiculous. Maria started noticing things too. The way some neighbors, who'd initially been friendly, suddenly became busy checking their mail when we walked by. The way certain cars slowed, just a beat too long as they passed our driveway. She'd mention it quietly, late at night. Am I imagining things, David? Or are we being watched? I'd try to reassure her. It's just a new place, honey. People are still getting used to us. But even as I said it, a cold knot formed in my stomach. I'd felt this before. This quiet, insidious scrutiny. The kind that slowly chips away at your sense of belonging. The letters kept coming, each one more petty than the last. Our recycling bins were out too early on pickup day. The roses in our flower beds were the wrong variety for the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. One notice even complained about the sound of Leo's basketball bouncing in our own driveway, citing a disruption of quiet enjoyment. That last one infuriated me. My son was playing in our driveway. What was next? A complaint about the color of my skin. Then came the summons. Formal, heavy stock paper notice requiring our presence at the next HOA board meeting. It listed a litany of repeated and uncorrected violations, vaguely threatening further punitive action. Punitive action, Maria whispered, her eyes wide as she read it over my shoulder. David, what does this even mean? Are they going to fine us into oblivion? I tried to keep my voice even, but I could feel the tremor of old anger rising. It means they want to make an example of us, Maria. They want to scare us. The night of the meeting arrived. I walked into the sterile community hall, Maria clutching my arm. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting a harsh glow on the half-empty chairs. At the head of the long table sat the HOA board. 3 men, 2 women, all of them older, with an air of entitlement that was almost palpable. Mr. Henderson, the board president, a portly man with a perpetually pursed mouth, stared at us from behind thick-rimmed glasses. His gaze was icy, dismissive. They went through the motions. reading out each supposed violation. Each complaint felt like a deliberate insult, a public shaming. They spoke in clipped tones, as if our very presence was an inconvenience. They didn't even look at us directly, addressing their remarks to the ceiling or their spreadsheets. Mr. Davis, Henderson finally said, leaning forward, his voice dripping with condescension. Your disregard for community guidelines is unprecedented. We understand that some residents may struggle with the standards we uphold here at Willow Creek Estates. Perhaps this community is not suitable for everyone. The unspoken message hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. You don't belong here. Maria squeezed my arm. I felt her trembling. I knew what she was thinking, what we were thinking. All the struggles, all the times we'd been told, subtly or directly, that we weren't quite right, not quite good enough, not quite deserving. We take these matters very seriously, Mr. Davis, a woman with a severe bob cut added, her voice sharp as a razor. Continued non-compliance could lead to escalating fines and ultimately, for extreme cases, even a revocation of residency privileges. Revocation of residency privileges, eviction. They were threatening to kick us out of our own home. My home. The home I had poured my life into securing. The dream I had built brick by brick. A quiet fury began to simmer inside me. It wasn't the kind that boiled over into shouting. It was a cold, calculated rage. A deep resolve that solidified every muscle in my body. They thought they had me. They thought I was just some random black man who had somehow slipped through the cracks into their pristine, lily-white world. They thought they could bully me out. They had no idea. Not a single clue. I looked at Maria, her face etched with worry. I saw the fear in her eyes, but also a quiet strength, a trust in me. And I knew, right then, that I wouldn't let them break us. Not this time. Not ever again. I understand, I said, my voice calm, steady. Too calm, perhaps. It unnerved them. Henderson shifted in his seat. I understand perfectly. We left the meeting in silence. The air outside was cool, but my blood felt like ice. Maria looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. What do we do, David? I stopped, right there on the sidewalk, under the pale glow of a street lamp. We fight back, I told her, my voice low and firm, but not on their terms. I had a plan, a secret I had kept for years, a secret that was about to turn their world and ours completely upside down. They wanted to play games? Fine. I would show them a game they never saw coming. The first letter was just the beginning, a polite but firm notice about our lawn being 2 inches too long. Violation of governance, conditions and restrictions. Article 7, Section 3. Maintain pristine appearance. We cut it. No big deal. We wanted to be good neighbors. Then came the next. Our trash cans, apparently, were placed out 12 hours too early for collection. Another violation. Another letter. These weren't just generic notices. They felt targeted. They felt personal. My wife, Sarah, started to worry. David, she'd say, her voice soft with concern. Is everything okay? Are we doing something wrong? She pointed to the perfectly manicured lawn across the street, where the Hendersons, a white family, left their bins out for days. No letter for them. I'd just shake my head, a quiet storm brewing inside me. No, Sarah, we're doing nothing wrong. But I knew. I felt it in my bones. It was the same familiar chill I'd known my whole life, the chill of being seen as other. I thought back to my childhood, to the small apartment building where my mother worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. I remembered the landlord, Mr. Henderson, no relation to these Hendersons, but the name echoed, who always found something wrong with our apartment, a leaky faucet, a scuff on the wall, minor issues. But for our apartment, they were always grounds for threatened eviction. Never for the white families on the floor above us. Never. That feeling, that knot in my stomach, had propelled me forward. It had fueled my ambition. It had made me work harder, study longer, invest smarter. I wanted to build a world where my children, Maya and Michael, would never feel that cold, judging stare. A world where they belonged. A world where they were safe. This new home, this beautiful house in this exclusive development, was supposed to be that sanctuary. But the letters kept coming. A misplaced garden gnome, the specific shade of paint on our fence, not conforming to the approved palette, a basketball hoop, temporarily set up in the driveway for Michael, deemed an impermissible obstruction. Each one was a tiny cut, designed to wear us down, to make us feel unwelcome, to make us leave. One afternoon, I was outside watering Sarah's prize winning rose bushes. Mrs. Albright, a prominent HOA board member whose house backed onto ours, peered over her immaculate hedge. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Miller," she chirped, her voice saccharine. "Lovely roses. But do remember, the HOA bylaws dictate only native flora in front-facing garden beds. And these," she gestured vaguely at Sarah's carefully selected blooms, "are rather exotic, wouldn't you say?" My hands tightened on the hose. "Mrs. Albright," I said, my voice even, "these are hybrid tea roses. They're common, and they're not in a front-facing bed. They're on the side." She waved a dismissive hand. "Details, details. Just ensure you're in compliance. We wouldn't want any unpleasantness, would we?" Her eyes flickered to our children's bikes, leaning against the garage door. Such a vibrant community. We must maintain our standards. The veiled threat hung in the air like smog. She was not talking about roses. She was talking about us. That night, Sarah was in tears. "David, I can't take this anymore. Every time I step outside, I feel eyes on me. Maya came home from school today, saying one of her classmates told her their parents said we were breaking all the rules. It's getting to the kids." That broke my heart more than any letter. My children. They were starting to feel the weight of prejudice. This was no longer just about us. It was about their peace of mind. I held Sarah close. "It's okay," I whispered, though my heart was raging. "It's going to be okay. I've got this." But I knew okay wasn't enough. We needed more than okay. We needed absolute, undeniable justice. We needed to dismantle this entire structure of arbitrary power. I retrieved the thick binder from my study. Inside were not just the latest HOA letters, but the complete set of documents from our purchase. The deed, the covenants, the developer's original prospectus, the entire ownership structure of the development. Each page represented years of quiet, meticulous planning. I spent hours poring over them again, my mind sharp, focused. Every word, every clause, every legal loophole. I cross-referenced dates, names, companies. My plan, forged in the fires of past indignities, was now crystallizing into action. The next morning, a certified letter arrived. This one wasn't about a gnome or a rose. It was an official notice from the HOA board's legal counsel. It cited multiple egregious and unaddressed violations. It stated in stark, unforgiving terms that due to our repeated non-compliance, the HOA was initiating proceedings to revoke our residency rights and ultimately evict us from our home. Eviction. The word itself was a punch to the gut. It echoed the threats of my childhood. But this time, it felt different. This time, I wasn't a scared child. I was a man who had built an empire from nothing, and they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I folded the letter precisely, my jaw set. They wanted a fight. They were about to get one, but it wouldn't be the fight they expected. The HOA board had scheduled a special meeting to discuss the Miller family's continued disregard for community standards. The letter informed us we were required to attend. My wife was terrified. My children were confused. But for me, the stage was being set. I knew exactly what I would say, and more importantly, what I would reveal. This was no longer just about our house. It was about every single slight, every ignored potential, every prejudiced assumption. It was about proving, once and for all, that dignity cannot be evicted. The meeting was set for next Tuesday. They thought they had us cornered. They thought they held all the power. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Not yet. The eviction notice arrived in a thick envelope. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a formal document, paragraphs of legalese, citing obscure bylaws, culminating in a date by which we were expected to vacate our home, our sanctuary. Sarah's hand trembled as she held it. Her eyes scanned the words, then met mine. Fear, raw and undeniable, flashed in their depths. Our children, playing in the living room, were oblivious. Their laughter felt like a cruel counterpoint to the dread settling in our chests. This is this is insane, David, she whispered, her voice barely audible. They can't just do this. But they were trying, and the chilling reality was, they very well could. At least they thought they could. My jaw tightened. This wasn't about a misplaced garbage bin or overgrown hedges anymore. This was a targeted campaign, a calculated move to make us uncomfortable, to make us leave, because we didn't fit their narrow, bleached-out vision of what a homeowner in Crestwood Lakes should look like. I looked at our home, the porch swing where we spent evenings watching the sunset, the rose bushes Sarah had meticulously planted, the scratch marks on the kitchen floor from our dog, Buster, chasing after the kids. Every inch of this house was imbued with our lives, our dreams, and they wanted to rip it all away. A bitter taste filled my mouth. It wasn't just anger. It was a familiar, heavy exhaustion. This wasn't the first time I'd encountered this kind of quiet, insidious prejudice. It was a ghost that had haunted my journey from the projects to this tree-lined street. I remembered the countless doors slammed in my face, the investors who smiled politely but never returned my calls, the subtle comments in boardrooms questioning my experience, my qualifications, my very presence. Always about something other than my skin, of course, always veiled in professional skepticism or concern for fit. But the message was always crystal clear. You don't belong. I had learned to fight those battles with intellect, with undeniable success, with sheer force of will. I had built an empire from nothing, brick by painful brick, and I had done it. So my children would never have to experience that same raw, grinding struggle. So they could simply be here, in their home. Now, here it was again, right on our doorstep. I took the notice from Sarah. My fingers didn't tremble. Instead, a cold steel settled deep within me. This wasn't just about our eviction. This was about their power, their perceived right to decide who was worthy. They've gone too far, I said, my voice low, steady. I met Sarah's gaze, trying to project a strength I wasn't entirely feeling, for her sake, for our kids. This stops now. She looked at me, a flicker of hope amidst her fear. What do we do, David? I couldn't tell her my full plan. Not yet. She knew about the property investments, the various holdings I had acquired over the years. But the full scope, the intricate web of ownership, was a secret I had meticulously guarded. Not out of malice, but out of a deep-seated caution born from a lifetime of being underestimated. We don't react on their terms, I replied. We don't give them the satisfaction of seeing us rattled. That evening, I retreated to my study. The eviction notice lay flat on my mahogany desk, a stark symbol of their audacity. I pulled up the intricate property maps of Crestwood Lakes, the initial development plans, the various deeds and ownership transfers. I zoomed in, then zoomed out. The layers of acquisition, the shell corporations, the holding companies, the trusts. It was all there, a meticulous paper trail, carefully constructed over years, through various entities, ensuring anonymity, a shield against the very kind of targeted discrimination we were now facing. I saw the names of the HOA board members, listed as residents, homeowners, Mrs. Albright, Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Chen. They were just names on a screen to me, names of people who thought they held all the cards. A ghost of a smile touched my lips. They had no idea. I recalled the day I first heard about Crestwood Lakes, a new development, marketed as exclusive, upscale, a chance for families like ours to build a life. I saw potential, not just in the houses, but in the land itself, an opportunity to invest, to diversify, a quiet play. It started with a few parcels, then larger blocks. Eventually, through a series of complex, discrete transactions, one holding company after another, it accumulated the majority of the land, the infrastructure, the very ground beneath their manicured lawns. I was the silent partner, the unseen hand, the true architect of Crestwood Lakes. The irony was delicious. They were trying to evict the very person who owned the roof over their heads. My initial intention was never to reveal this. It was a contingency, a safety net, an investment. But their actions had pushed me. They had forced my hand, and in doing so, they had unwittingly unleashed a force they couldn't comprehend. I leaned back in my chair. My gaze fell upon a framed photograph on my desk. Sarah, the kids, and me beaming on the front porch of this very house, our home. They wanted to take that from us? Not a chance. I picked up my phone. The time for quiet observation was over. The time for action had begun. I needed to assemble my team, the lawyers, the financial advisors, the public relations experts, people who understood discretion, people who understood power. This wouldn't be a messy public confrontation. It would be precise, surgical, and utterly devastating for those who had abused their positions. The eviction notice stared up at me. It was their declaration of war, and I was about to deliver my response. A response they would never forget. The first call I made was to my lead counsel, Marcus. His voice was calm, steady, even late at night. "Marcus," I said, my voice low and determined, "it's time. I need you to initiate the process for a full board recall." He paused, knowing the weight of that statement. "Understood, David, and the other matter." "That too," I affirmed. "Prepare the documentation. Every single detail. We'll need it all." The game was on, and they had no idea who they were truly playing against. Tomorrow, a different kind of notice would begin circulating, a notice of my own. The envelope arrived like a cold slap, thick, official, bearing the HOA's stark black logo. My heart tightened as I saw the words, "Final Notice of Intent to Evict." They weren't playing games anymore. This wasn't just a threat. This was a direct, calculated move to drive us out. I sat at the kitchen table, the fluorescent light casting a harsh glow on the document. Every legal term, every clause, felt like a deliberate insult. They cited made-up violations, exaggerated minor infractions, twisted the truth until it was unrecognizable. The disruptive behavior of my children playing in their own yard, the unapproved landscaping of a rose bush I'd planted 2 seasons ago. It was all a thinly veiled pretext. It was all about the color of our skin. My wife, Sarah, walked in, her eyes immediately drawn to the paper in my hand. Her face, usually so warm and bright, clouded with concern. "What is it, David?" she asked, her voice hushed. She knew. She always knew when trouble arrived. I slid the notice across the table. Her gaze swept over the words, her expression shifting from apprehension to anger, then to a quiet sadness. "They're really doing it," she whispered, more to herself than to me. "They're really trying to kick us out." The kids, oblivious, were laughing in the living room, a sound that usually filled our home with joy, but now felt like a fragile shield against the storm brewing outside. Sarah looked towards the sound, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "They love this house, David. They love their school, their friends." That tear, that quiet pain in her voice, ignited a fire deep within me. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was about our children's peace, their sense of belonging, their fundamental right to feel safe in their own home. I reached across the table, taking her hand. Her fingers were cold. "They won't win, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, though my insides churned. "Not like this." The next few days were a blur of hushed conversations and veiled glances. We tried to keep the details from the children, but a tremor in the air always makes itself known. My youngest, Maya, came to me one evening as I was reading her a bedtime story. Her small hand reached up, touching my face. "Daddy," she asked, her voice soft, "are we going to move again?" My throat tightened. "No, sweet pea," I managed, pulling her closer. "This is our home. We're staying right here." But her innocent question echoed in my mind, a stark reminder of the fear they carried, the burden of our struggle that seeped into their young lives despite our best efforts. I spent my evenings in my home office, the glow of my laptop illuminating stacks of documents. My legal team was working tirelessly, preparing our defense. But their strategy was one of argument, of fighting on the HOA's chosen battlefield. My strategy was different. It was bigger. It was about turning the very ground beneath their feet into quicksand. I reviewed every deed, every obscure clause, every historical document related to the development. The sheer volume of paperwork was staggering, a testament to decades of careful planning and strategic acquisitions. Each page solidified my position, strengthened my resolve. They thought they held all the cards, but they were playing with a deck I had personally stacked. One afternoon, I ran into Mr. Henderson, the HOA board president at the community park. He was with his grandchildren, but his smile vanished the moment he saw me. He approached, his posture stiff, his eyes cold, and devoid of any neighborly warmth. "Mr. Davis," he began, his voice dripping with condescension, "I trust you received our latest communication." I met his gaze, my expression unreadable. "I did, Mr. Henderson." "Good," he sniffed, adjusting his blazer. "We expect your full cooperation. This community has standards, you see, standards we intend to uphold." He paused, his eyes sweeping over my modest work clothes, then back to my face, a barely perceptible sneer. "Some people just don't understand how things work around here, how much it takes to maintain a certain caliber." His words hung in the air, a thinly veiled insult wrapped in the cloak of property values. He thought he was intimidating me, reminding me of my place. What he didn't know was that every word, every patronizing glance was fuel to the fire I had been nurturing. "I understand perfectly, Mr. Henderson," I replied, my voice calm, almost too calm. "And I assure you, my understanding of how things work around here is quite comprehensive." He chuckled, a dismissive, mirthless sound. "We'll see about that, won't we? The board has scheduled a final hearing next Tuesday. I advise you to be prepared. This isn't a suggestion, Mr. Davis. This is a directive, and failure to comply will have Consequences. He gave me a curt nod, a victor delivering a final warning, then turned and walked away, his grandchildren trailing behind him, innocent in their ignorance. I watched him go. The image of his smug face burned into my memory. Next Tuesday, the final hearing. They thought it was their last play. They thought they had cornered us. They thought they were about to deliver the knockout blow. But they were wrong. So terribly, profoundly wrong. The stage was set. The audience was gathered. And I was ready to give them a show they would never forget. All the quiet preparations, all the sleepless nights, all the hidden truths were finally aligning. The time for their humiliation was near. The envelope lay on the counter, thick, official, not just a warning this time, not another petty fine for a lawn too tall by a fraction of an inch, or a recycling bin left out an hour too long. This was different. My name, our address, printed with a cold formal precision that chilled me to the bone. Simone picked it up, her brow furrowed. "What's this, Marcus?" I felt it before she even opened it. The dread, the tightening in my chest. I knew what it was, knew what they'd been building towards. She tore the seal. Her eyes scanned the page, wide, disbelieving. Then a gasp, a small, broken sound. "Eviction," she whispered, the word hanging heavy in the air. "They're trying to evict us." My heart pounded. Not just a threat of fines, not just a notice, an official eviction order, citing repeated, unaddressed violations of community bylaws and conduct detrimental to the harmony and aesthetic standards of Willow Creek. The sheer audacity of it, the gall, to attempt to remove us from our home, from the home I had poured my lifeblood into building. Simone's hands trembled as she handed me the document. I read the legalese, the cold, calculated phrases. It wasn't just a bluff anymore. This was their final move in their game of intimidation. They wanted us out. They truly did. Maya, our daughter, came skipping into the kitchen then, oblivious. "Daddy, can we go to the park?" Simone pulled her close, hiding the paper from her sight. Her eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of fear and rage. "Marcus, what do we do?" What indeed? The truth, the one I held so close, so carefully guarded, burned on my tongue. It felt like a betrayal to keep it from her in this moment of raw panic. But the timing, it had to be perfect. The humiliation had to reach its peak for the justice to truly land. I took a deep breath. "We go to the meeting," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "We face them." The meeting was called for Friday night. A special session, the notice proclaimed, to address the ongoing issues with the occupants of 142 Sycamore Lane. Our address, our family, publicly singled out. The days leading up to it were heavy. Simone walked around with a cloud over her. Her usual vibrant spirit dimmed. Maya sensed it, asked us why Mommy was sad. We told her everything was fine, that grown-ups just had to talk about grown-up things. A lie. A necessary lie to protect her from the ugliness that festered just beneath the polished surface of Willow Creek. My nights were sleepless. I sat in the quiet. The eviction notice spread out before me. I looked at the signatures. Mrs. Albright, the HOA president, her elegant looping script, Mr. Davies, Mr. Miller, their names, forever etched into this document of injustice. They thought they had me, thought they had us. The anger was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I remembered the early days, the long hours poring over architectural plans, the meticulous selection of every material, every vendor, the vision I had. A community, a true community, not this. Not a bastion of exclusion and petty tyranny. Friday evening arrived. The HOA clubhouse was usually a place for cheerful potlucks or children's birthday parties. Tonight it felt like a courtroom. The air was thick with unspoken judgment. We walked in, Simone clinging to my arm. Maya was at her grandmother's house, safe from this spectacle. A small mercy. The board members sat at a long table facing us, a panel of self appointed judges. Mrs. Albright, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and pursed lips, presided at the center. She offered us a tight, humorless smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, she began, her voice crisp, devoid of warmth. Thank you for joining us. The room was filled with other residents. Some avoided our gaze, staring at the polished wood floor. Others, the usual complainers, the busybodies, watched us with undisguised curiosity, even satisfaction. They had come for the show. As you know, Mrs. Albright continued, her gaze sweeping across the room, the Willow Creek Homeowners Association is dedicated to upholding the standards and bylaws that ensure our community remains pristine, harmonious, and desirable. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Unfortunately, your residency at 142 Sycamore Lane has presented a number of challenges. She gestured to a large binder in front of her. We have compiled a comprehensive record of violations, repeated warnings, and unaddressed concerns. She listed them: a garden hose left out overnight once, a car parked slightly over the property line, the excessive noise of Maya playing in the backyard, the unapproved exterior decoration of our small, tasteful garden gnome. Each accusation, twisted and exaggerated, designed to paint us as unruly, disrespectful, unworthy. My blood ran cold. The sheer pettiness of it all was staggering. But underneath, I knew, lay the true violation in their eyes: the color of our skin. Mr. Davies spoke next, his tone aggressive. The board has sent multiple communications, Mr. Johnson, and yet here we are. It seems you simply refuse to conform. Simone squeezed my arm, her knuckles white. I could feel her anger, her humiliation. She wanted to speak, to defend us, to shout at their absurd accusations. But I held her back with a subtle pressure on her hand. Not yet. We have no choice then, Mrs. Albright concluded, her voice taking on a tone of practiced regret, but to proceed with the legal steps outlined in your eviction notice. We've tried to be lenient, we truly have, but the integrity of Willow Creek must be maintained. A murmur rippled through the room. Some sympathetic glances, mostly from newer residents, quickly quelled by the prevailing atmosphere. Most nodded gravely, as if they were witnessing a necessary execution. My gaze swept over them all. The board members, puffed up with their petty power. The residents who reveled in our public shaming. They saw us as defeated, as outcasts. They saw me, a black man, being put in his place. My throat tightened. The sting of their judgment, their casual cruelty, was a physical blow. I felt the weight of generations of injustice, of having to endure, to swallow, to be less than in the eyes of others. But then a different feeling bloomed, a quiet, burning resolve. This was it, the lowest point, the moment when they truly believed they had won. I looked at Mrs. Albright, her face set in a mask of triumph. She looked so confident, so smug. She had no idea. We understand your decision, Mrs. Albright, I said, my voice low but clear. Every head in the room turned to me. We truly do. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. She expected defiance, anger, not this quiet acceptance. It seems you leave us no alternative but to explore all available avenues to protect our family and our home, I continued, meeting her gaze steadily. My words were carefully chosen, a veiled promise, a hint of something more, but they were too consumed by their victory to hear it. She merely nodded, a dismissive gesture. Indeed, Mr. Johnson, that is your right. And ours, I added, a small knowing smile playing on my lips, a smile she utterly misinterpreted as resignation. We stood up, Simone still tense, still wanting to fight. I gently guided her towards the door. The eyes of the room followed us, their judgments like daggers in our backs. As we stepped out into the cool night air, the injustice of it all washed over Simone. She pulled away from me, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Marcus, how can they do this? Where will we go? Her voice was a broken whisper. I wrapped her in my arms, holding her tight. I looked back at the clubhouse, light spilling from its windows, illuminating the smug faces within. They thought they had won. They thought they had erased us. We are not going anywhere, Simone, I said, my voice firm, resolute. Not anywhere at all. The time for quiet suffering was over. The time for the grand reveal was almost upon us. This humiliation, this public shaming, was merely the final prelude. They had built their house of cards, and I, Marcus Johnson, was about to blow it all down. The eviction notice landed on our doorstep like a death sentence. A crisp white envelope, official lettering, stark black print. It felt heavy, a physical weight pressing down on our lives. Maria picked it up, her hand trembling. Her eyes scanned the words, then looked at me, wide with a fear I hadn't seen in her since our early struggling days. James, she whispered, the paper crinkling in her grasp. They're really doing it. Our kids, Maya and David, were playing quietly in the living room. They were too young to fully grasp the technical jargon, but they understood the shift in the air, the sudden hush, the tightness in their mother's voice. They stopped playing, their little faces mirroring Maria's distress. My heart ached, a sharp, bitter pain. This wasn't just about us anymore. It was about them, about the home we had promised them, the stability we had worked so hard to build. It's going to be okay, I said, my voice steadier than my spirit. I walked over, took the notice from Maria's hand. The words swam before my eyes. Violation of covenants, failure to adhere, immediate vacancy required. It was all a lie, a fabricated excuse for their true intent, their prejudice, plain and simple, dressed up in legal terms. That night, sleep was a stranger. I lay awake. The image of that notice burned behind my eyelids. I thought of all the times we had faced adversity, all the obstacles we had overcome. From scratch, from nothing, building a life brick by brick. And now, these people, these self-appointed gatekeepers, thought they could dismantle it all with a piece of paper. The injustice of it burned, a slow, hot ember in my chest. Maria cried herself to sleep beside me. I could hear her quiet sobs, feel the tremble in her body. I felt utterly helpless, a sensation I loathed. But beneath the helplessness, something else was brewing. A cold, hard resolve, a quiet fury. They had pushed us. They had pushed us too far. The next few days were a blur of tension. The air in our home was thick with unspoken fear. Maya and David, usually so boisterous, became withdrawn. They asked questions a few times, innocent questions about why the other kids weren't playing with them anymore, why Mrs. Henderson glared when we passed her. Each question was a fresh stab. The HOA didn't just stop at the eviction notice. Their campaign of harassment intensified. Suddenly, our lawn, which had always been meticulously cared for, was deemed too tall. Our rose bushes, blooming beautifully, were non-compliant. We received letters for trivial infractions, each one carrying a hefty fine. They even tried to block Maya from participating in the community summer fair, claiming her registration was incomplete. Maria was at her breaking point. One evening, after receiving another ridiculous fine for our fence being the wrong shade of white, She sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. James, please, she choked out, her voice muffled. I can't take this anymore. The kids, they're suffering. Maybe we should just leave, find somewhere else, start over. Her plea tore at me. It was the sensible human thing to say, to escape the torment, to protect our children. But I looked at her, at the raw pain in her eyes, and I knew I couldn't. Not like this. Not by letting them win. It wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about standing firm. It was about proving them wrong. It was about the principle of it all. I thought of my grandfather, a man who had faced worse, much worse, with an unwavering spine. He had taught me the value of quiet strength, of knowing who you are, and not letting anyone diminish that. This wasn't just a fight for our home, it was a fight for our dignity, for his legacy, for the future of our children, to show them that sometimes you have to fight back against injustice, even when it feels overwhelming. No, Maria, I said, my voice low but firm. We are not leaving. Not now. Not ever. This is our home, and they will not take it from us. Her eyes, red-rimmed and exhausted, met mine. She saw something there, I think. Not just anger, but a deep-seated resolve. A fire that had been smoldering for too long, finally catching. That night I made the calls. Not to a moving company, not to a real estate agent to list our house. I called Mr. Davies, my attorney, the same man who had helped me navigate the complex legalities when I first acquired this entire housing development years before. He was an old friend, a trusted counsel. Davies, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. It's time. They've crossed every line. He listened patiently as I recounted the latest onslaught of harassment, the eviction notice, the absurd fines. His voice on the other end of the line was calm, reassuring. I understand, James. It's despicable. But you always knew this day might come, didn't you? That's why we drafted those particular clauses into the HOA agreement. Yes, I confirmed, a grim satisfaction settling over me. The ones protecting residents from arbitrary and discriminatory actions by the board. We had covered every angle, every potential loophole. I had built this system to be fair, to be a sanctuary, never imagining I would be the one needing its most fundamental protections. We went over the documentation, the original deed, the ownership papers for the entire development, the legal framework of the HOA, which, unbeknownst to the current board, effectively made me the ultimate authority, the final say. It was all there, meticulously organized, locked away in a safe deposit box. I spent hours poring over the fine print myself, cross-referencing, ensuring every detail was bulletproof. There would be no room for error, no technicality they could exploit. This was not just about winning. It was about a complete and undeniable victory, a dismantling of their petty tyranny. The next morning, an official-looking envelope arrived. Not another fine, not another threat. This was a notice for an emergency HOA board meeting. The agenda: vote on final eviction proceedings for property 14B. Our address. I stared at the paper. This was it. The stage was set. They were walking straight into the trap they had so diligently laid for themselves. A quiet smile, grim and knowing, touched my lips. Maria, I called, walking into the kitchen where she was preparing breakfast, still looking worn, but with a flicker of hope I hadn't seen in days. Get the kids ready. We're going to a meeting. She looked at me, confused, then concerned. A meeting? James? Why? They're just going to humiliate us again. No, I said, my eyes holding hers. Not this time. This time we're going to remind them who they're dealing with. The tension in the air was palpable, but it was a different kind now. It was no longer just fear. It was anticipation. I felt a surge of strength, of purpose. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning, and I knew exactly how it would end. The air in the HOA conference room was thick with unspoken prejudice. It hung heavy, suffocating. They had called this special session with a smug confidence that bordered on cruelty. Not for new landscaping, not for community safety, but for us, to finalize our humiliation. Maria held my hand under the polished mahogany table. Her grip was so tight, her knuckles white. I could feel her trembling, a tremor that ran through my own arm, a testament to the fear she wrestled with. Maya, usually a whirlwind of bright energy, sat unnaturally still beside her mother. Her eyes were fixed on her lap, her small shoulders hunched, trying to make herself invisible. My heart ached, a deep, bruising pain, seeing them so vulnerable, so diminished. This wasn't right. They didn't deserve this. None of us did. Mr. Henderson, the self-appointed king of this small prejudiced domain, cleared his throat with a theatrical flourish. He sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of self-importance, a thin, triumphant smile playing on his lips. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, he began, his voice dripping with condescension, we've reviewed your case extensively. His words were heavy, each syllable designed to weigh us down, to remind us of our supposed place. Mrs. Albright, his ever-eager accomplice, nodded vigorously beside him. Her eyes, usually cold and calculating, now held a glint of undeniable triumph. Despite numerous warnings, she chimed in, her voice sharp, and repeated attempts to reach a resolution. Her words were a slow, deliberate drumbeat, hammering away at our composure, chipping at our dignity. The board has no choice, Mr. Henderson continued, leaning forward, savoring the moment, but to proceed with the eviction process. Maria gasped softly beside me. It was a small broken sound, like a fragile bird caught in a trap. Maya flinched, her entire body tensing, her chin beginning to tremble. The room felt like it was spinning, the walls closing in. Our world, our sanctuary, the peaceful home we had built with so much hope, was being pulled out from under us. All because of what? The color of our skin? The quiet dignity we tried to maintain in the face of their relentless hostility? A lifetime of fighting these invisible battles had etched an unwavering resolve into my soul, but even I felt the cold grip of fury. I kept my face calm, controlled, for them, for my family. Eviction, Maria whispered, her voice choked, barely audible. On what grounds? Mr. Henderson chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound that scraped against my ears. Breaches of contract, Mrs. Johnson, unpaid fines, disregard for community standards. He gestured grandly to a thick stack of papers before him, a dossier of invented infractions, fines for excessive gardening. Our flower beds were beautiful, meticulously tended. Fines for unapproved exterior paint color. The house was painted that exact shade when we bought it, approved by the previous board. Fines for disruptive noise. Maya, practicing her violin with a soft reverence for music. It was all a charade, a grotesque performance of power and prejudice. These fines, he stated, his voice rising in manufactured outrage, now total over $50,000. $50,000 for simply existing, for daring to live in our own home, our own skin. And the eviction notice, Mrs. Albright added, her voice a cruel pronouncement, will be served within 48 hours. She watched us, her gaze expectant, waiting for us to break, to plead, to cry. I looked at my daughter. Her small hands were clenched into fists, resting in her lap. Her chin was trembling uncontrollably. I looked at my wife, her beautiful eyes wide with desperation, pleading with mine, searching for answers, for hope. David, Maria whispered, tears finally escaping and tracking paths down her cheeks. What are we going to do? The faces around the table were a blur of smug satisfaction, a tableau of triumph. They had us, or so they thought. Every subtle insult, every quiet slight, every overt act of hostility I had endured throughout my life had forged a core of steel within me. It had taught me patience beyond measure. It had taught me resilience that bent but never broke. And it had taught me to always have a plan. Not just a plan B, a fortress, an unshakable foundation built on meticulous planning and quiet strength. They saw a black family, vulnerable, cornered. They saw a man who had worked hard, yes, but still, in their prejudiced eyes, an outsider. They didn't see the years of sacrifice, the late nights, the calculated risks, the quiet accumulation of power and influence. They saw only what they wanted to see. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs, fueling my resolve. My hand instinctively moved to the worn leather briefcase at my feet. It contained everything, every single detail. The contracts, the deeds, the overwhelming evidence that would turn their carefully constructed world upside down. Mr. Henderson leaned back in his chair, a triumphant smirk stretching across his face. Unless, of course, he said, drawing out the words, prolonging our agony, you have something new to present. He gestured vaguely, a dismissive wave of his hand, as if giving us a last, pointless chance, a final act of condescending charity. He expected silence, expected defeat. Maria gripped my arm tighter, her nails digging into my skin, her eyes wide with desperate hope. Maya finally looked up, her innocent gaze meeting mine, a silent question in their depths. They needed me, now, more than ever. I slowly, deliberately, pushed back my chair. The sound of it scraping against the polished floor echoed loudly in the suddenly hushed room. Every eye in the room, now tinged with a flicker of curiosity, turned to me. I stood tall, straightening my jacket, my gaze sweeping across their smug faces. My voice, when it came, was calm, firm, unwavering. As a matter of fact, Mr. Henderson, I said, allowing a small, knowing smile to touch my lips, I do. I picked up my briefcase, the familiar weight of it feeling like the weight of destiny itself. I placed it deliberately on the table, right between us. The two brass clasps gleamed under the harsh fluorescent light. And I believe, I continued, unlatching the clasps, the click echoing loudly in the silent room. This will change things considerably. The first document I pulled out from the neat stack inside was a single sheet of paper, crisp, authoritative, a property deed. I slid it across the table towards Mr. Henderson, watching his face intently. His smirk faltered. His eyes, initially dismissive, began to focus. He picked it up, his brow furrowing slightly in confusion. He scanned the document. Then his eyes widened. A flicker of disbelief, then dawning realization, then something akin to raw, unadulterated fear. He looked up at me, his face pale, his mouth slightly agape. "What? What is this?" he stammered, his voice weak, a stark contrast to his earlier bluster. I allowed myself a small, tight smile. The moment was almost here, the complete and utter reversal, but not quite yet. I just let the silence hang, heavy and pregnant with untold truth. The entire HOA board watched him, their own curiosity piqued, their unease growing with his visible distress. His hand trembled slightly as he held the paper, the official seals and legal jargon suddenly seeming to mock him. His gaze darted from the document to my face, then back again. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish out of water. "Mr. Henderson?" Mrs. Albright prompted, an edge of impatience creeping into her voice. "What does it say?" He looked up at her, his eyes glazed with shock, unable to articulate the words. He started to say something, then choked on his own breath, pointing a shaking finger at the document, a silent plea for someone else to interpret the damning truth. I watched their faces, each emotion playing out in slow motion. The arrogance draining away, replaced by confusion. The confidence eroding, giving way to dawning dread. A single piece of paper, and the world they knew, the power they wielded, was about to crumble around them. I leaned forward, my voice low, but carrying across the suddenly very small room. Perhaps, I suggested, my eyes locking with Henderson's. You'd like to share what you found with the rest of the board? He swallowed hard, a visible gulp. His gaze was trapped, caught between the damning evidence in his hands and the quiet power in my eyes. He knew. He finally knew. And he knew that I knew. The battle was far from over, but the tide, irrevocably, had turned. I just waited, letting the tension build, letting the full weight of what was coming settle over them like a thick, chilling fog. The silence was deafening. The room felt silent, a heavy, suffocating silence. You could hear the fluorescent lights humming above us. Every single face on the HOA board went slack. Their mouths hung open, useless. Mr. Henderson, the self-appointed king of this little domain, looked like he'd been punched. His florid face drained of all color. Mrs. Albright's eyes, usually so sharp and judgmental, glazed over with disbelief. It was as if I had spoken in a language they couldn't possibly comprehend. "What? What did you just say?" Mr. Henderson stammered, his voice a pathetic croak. My father stood tall. He hadn't moved an inch since his revelation. His voice, calm and steady, filled the void. "I said, Mr. Henderson, that I am the owner of this entire development. Every single lot, every single house." He paused, letting the words sink in, twisting the knife. "Including, of course, the property where you all reside." A tremor went through the board members. Mrs. Albright gasped, a small choked sound. Mr. Davies, who had been so smug just moments ago, actually pushed his chair back, as if trying to create distance between himself and this sudden, inconvenient truth. My mother gripped my hand. Her touch was firm, a silent message of strength. I looked at her, then at my father. His eyes met mine, a flicker of triumph, but mostly a deep, quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about malice. It was about justice. He pulled a thick, official-looking binder from his bag. It was meticulously organized, tabs marking different sections. He opened it to a page. "For those of you who require visual confirmation," he said, his tone dry, "here are the deeds. All of them. In the name of Carmichael Holdings LLC, which, as you may verify, is entirely owned by me, Robert Carmichael." He slid the binder across the polished table, stopping it directly in front of Mr. Henderson. The man stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't touch it. He couldn't. You can't be serious," Mr. Henderson finally managed, finding his voice, though it cracked with a desperate edge. "This is a joke. A sick, cruel joke." My father merely raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like I'm joking, Mr. Henderson? Does the legal counsel I've had waiting outside, ready to serve you all with cease and desist orders and potential litigation for harassment and discrimination, look like a joke?" At his subtle nod, a man in a sharp suit, followed by 2 security guards, entered the room. The air crackled with a new kind of tension. This wasn't a family fighting for their home anymore. This was a force of nature. The lawyer, a stern-faced woman, didn't waste a second. She held up a stack of documents. "Good evening, members of the Riverwood HOA board. My name is Attorney Eleanor Vance. I represent Mr. Robert Carmichael, the sole owner of Riverwood Estates. She looked directly at Mr. Henderson. Effective immediately, Mr. Carmichael is dissolving the current Homeowners Association board. Your services are no longer required. All board decisions, including the proposed eviction of the Carmichael family, are null and void. The words hit them like physical blows. Henderson's face contorted, a mixture of rage and terror. You can't do that! We're an elected body. We have bylaws. Bylaws established by a board governing a development owned by him, Attorney Vance stated, her voice unwavering. Bylaws that, I might add, Mr. Carmichael has identified as being selectively and unfairly enforced against specific residents, which constitutes a breach of contract and potentially discriminatory practices. She didn't miss a beat. Furthermore, Mr. Carmichael has initiated a full audit of all HOA funds and past decisions. Any evidence of malfeasance, abuse of power, or discriminatory actions will be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. The security guards moved closer, their presence a silent, undeniable threat. My father finally sat down, a calm figure amidst the unfolding chaos. He looked at each board member, one by one. There was no anger in his gaze, only a deep, unsettling resolve. For years, he said, his voice carrying clearly over the murmurs, I watched this development. I saw the potential, and I also saw the subtle ways some residents were treated differently, the rules that seemed to only apply to certain families, the quiet exclusions, the whispers. He leaned forward slightly. I bought this property because I believed in a vision of community, a true community where everyone is welcome and everyone is treated with respect and fairness, not a place where power is wielded to make others feel unwelcome in their own homes. He paused, his eyes lingering on Mr. Henderson, who was now visibly trembling. You tried to take my home. You tried to humiliate my family. You thought you had power over us. But you misunderstood who held the real power. My father picked up a pen from the table, twirling it idly. Consider this your notice. All of you. You are removed from your positions. Interim management will be appointed within 24 hours. A new HOA board will be formed with diverse representation and transparent practices to serve the entire community, not just a select few. He looked at me, a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I understood. This was not just about us. This was about every family they had quietly intimidated, every person they had made to feel less than. The HOA board members began to gather their belongings, their movements stiff and uncoordinated. Their air of superiority had vanished, replaced by a hollow defeat. Mr. Henderson, still white-faced, stared at my father with a gaze of pure impotent hatred. But my father didn't flinch. As they filed out, escorted by security, the room slowly emptied. Only my family, Attorney Vance, and one of the security guards remained. My mother finally let out a long, shaky breath. She pulled me into a tight embrace. "Oh, Robert," she whispered to my father, tears welling in her eyes. "You did it. You really did it." He wrapped an arm around her, a gentle smile gracing his lips. "It was time, my love. It was long past time." The weight that had pressed down on us for weeks, months even, lifted. It wasn't just the threat of eviction that dissolved. It was the constant, subtle burden of being scrutinized, of feeling like we had to prove our worth in a place we paid to live. My father turned to Attorney Vance. "Eleanor, please ensure the formal notifications are sent out immediately and start the process for establishing a truly inclusive and equitable new board. I want this to be a model for how a community should be run." "Consider it done, Mr. Carmichael," she replied, her own face reflecting a quiet satisfaction. We stood there for a moment, bathed in the silent glow of the meeting room. The battle was over. The war against injustice, at least in our small corner of the world, had been won. But as I looked around the now empty room, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where true community would finally have a chance to bloom, free from the shadows of prejudice and the abuse of power. The seeds of change had been sown, and now it was time to cultivate them. The work was far from over.